How does one become a legend? How come that a small Japanese sports car would go on to impact the entire automotive market decades after it was produced? Was it chance? Or did Toyota actually produce a car so well that it's still to this day being spoken of? The AE86. For some, this is just another Corolla, but the AE86 goes by many names. Perhaps mostly known from the initial D anime as the Hachiroku. The AE86 could almost be described as a miracle. In reality, this car shouldn't even exist. In the 1980s, the automotive market was going through a drastic change. The US, who for the longest time had been the largest automotive manufacturer in the world, had been surpassed by Japan. At the rise was also the Iranian Revolution, which caused a worldwide disruption to the global oil supply. This meant gas prices saw sharp price hikes, and that gave automotive manufacturers the incentive to come up with a way to squeezing maximum mileage out of each drop of gasoline. And in order to do so, lighter vehicles were manufactured in order to contribute to increased fuel efficiency. An obvious way to decrease weight is to reduce vehicle size. But this was not much of an option for Japanese manufacturers who had been producing small cars for decades. One weight-reducing solution, however, was the adoption of the front-wheel drive system. This resulted in a new segment of performance cars, hot hatches. Cars like the Peugeot GTI, Golf GTI, Renault Turbo 5 and Honda Civic 1.6 VT, all of which had one thing in common: front-wheel drive. So where does the AE86 come into this picture? In order to understand why the AE86 utilized rear-wheel drive in a market so obviously aimed at the front-wheel drive layout, we have to go back a few years to its legacy. The Sprinter Trueno. The Sprinter Trueno was a series of compact sport coupés which were produced by Toyota from 1972 to 2000. The series began with the TE27, which were the high-performance model of the Corolla and was favorably used for racing and rallying. The TE27 were lightweight with a rev-happy engine. And more importantly, utilized rear-wheel drive. You could almost think of the Sprinter Trueno as Toyota's performance division, kind of how AMG is for Mercedes and RS is for Audi. The preceding models would always utilize rear-wheel drive up until a point where they wouldn't. During the development of the AE86, a transformation unfolded, whereas front-wheel drive was favored more often than not. But the designer of the AE86, Nobuaki Katayama, had a vision to continue the legacy of the Sprinter Trueno one last time, before finally retiring the rear-wheel drive layout in favor of a front-wheel drive drivetrain. It's important to remember not to take the AE86 for granted. If the AE86 hadn't been using rear-wheel drive, chances are that it would have been completely forgotten, just how the preceding generation has, the AE91. When producing an exceptional car, the drivetrain is arguably one of, if not the most critical component. A badly engineered drivetrain has the potential to completely ruin the entire car. And that's why Toyota produced a completely new engine for the AE86, the 4AGE. Toyota's 4AG engine was the very first mass-produced Japanese double overhead cam 4-cylinder engine. The 4AGE is known for its incredible 4-cylinder sound, which was partly thanks to the engine being co-developed with Yamaha. Throughout its lifespan between 1983 and 2000s, there was many revisions of the 4AGE, but we'll be covering the first revision, also known as the Blue Top, due to its blue top cover lettering. This version featured a 1587cc cast iron double overhead cam 4-valve inline 4 and produced for the Japanese market 118 horsepower. But what most people don't know about the 4AGE is that it's more or less a mass-produced race engine. The 4AGE shares more or less the exact metrics and measurements as Cosworth's BDA engine, which was a purpose-built race engine aimed to be used in the legendary Escort RS 1600. And despite not having a ton of power for today's standards, the 4AGE was a riot in its own rights. It was rev-happy, reliable, produced the most orgasmic 4-cylinder sound. Toyota had produced the perfect engine. There are many great cars out there, very similar to the AE86, but that has yet to obtain the legendary status. So why is this particular vehicle redeemed so highly? As many of you probably know, the 86 was featured in the massively popular manga series Initial D, where the 86 acts as the star and underdog of the show. Behind the wheel of the 86 is Takumi, who steadily ascends to legendary status race by race as he's defeating increasingly more difficult opponents and cars far more capable than his little Toyota. The consensus of the story is that the 86 actually is far more capable than anyone could have imagined. But it also gave some insight that the 86 wasn't only fast, but it could drift too. And who knows drifting better than the Drift King himself, Casey Tsuchiya. Casey Tsuchiya, or more commonly known as the Drift King, is a Japanese professional race car driver and drift enthusiast. The latter being a bit of an understatement, considering this man alone changed the meaning of drifting. On top of being a 2-time 24-hour Le Mans winner, Casey was also the first person to introduce drifting as a way to corner faster in professional racing. And the car he chose to do it with was the 86, which consequently became his go-to car due to its perfect balance and low weight. But Tsuchiya was also a consultant for the Initial D anime, where the main character, Takumi, is based a whole lot on Casey himself. He was also a stuntman for the Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift. And while Casey Tsuchiya had been driving a heap of different sports cars, there is one consistent car throughout his legendary career, and that is the 86. And it's clear to see why, since the car basically kickstarted his entire career. I quote, "In 1984, I won 6 races in a row with the 86 at the Fuji Freshman Race. After that, TRD approached me and asked me to race for them in the Japan Touring Car Championship, so that I could compete in the Group A World Championship. This is really the car I have to thank for that. And I have been driving it ever since. Car journalists all over the world often praise the 86 for its amazing rear-wheel drive balance and mechanical simplicity, which has made the car extremely attractive to tuners and drifters." And most importantly, at the time, the 86 was way cheaper than most of its competition, while still being a fierce force on the racetrack. And although that may not still remain true today, the principle remains. Almost 40 years later, the 86 is considered the original JDM OG and the catalyst for many great sports cars to come. But the 86 becomes more scarce by the minute, and the sad truth is, there are not many original examples left, and for those that do exist, most are stored away in some dark storage, never to see a road ever again. And while most of us will never be in a position to own an 86, what we can do is appreciate the ones that are being used, because that is the spirit of the JDM culture, and any electrification and automotive advancement can't take that away from us.